Hello, and welcome to Conversations with the Performance and Mindset Institute. My name is Dr. Angelia Williams, and myself, along with Dr. Mary Ann Markey, are the founders of this organization. During this podcast, we invite you to learn empirically proven tips, tools, and strategies that can improve your performance outcomes across many different contexts. We live in color, emotional beings. From moment to moment, it can change.
Thinking about the whole approval approach.
I think that you should rely more on intrinsic approval.
Yep.
And that's just simply because extrinsic approval is ever changing. And if you rely on extrinsic approval, you run the risk of how that's going to impact you cognitively if you don't receive that approval.
Yeah.
How is that going to affect you and even how you view yourself and, how you view your performance or how you perform versus if you have that approval intrinsically, that is something that you can set based on your own perception and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think extrinsic approval can be, I don't want to say a little dangerous because, of course, we all have a desire for extrinsic approval to a certain measure, but I think that the intrinsic approval is more important. It should weigh heavier than extrinsic approval.
Yeah, with extrinsic, you can lose it. It can be withdrawn from you for whatever reason. That's not to say that you don't lose track of intrinsic approval. It can fluctuate a bit, depending on perhaps the situation or the circumstances. But I think the realization that you can reinstate it and have more control over it. Extrinsic has a place. For example, perhaps it's validation. Perhaps it's, I like a sounding board. I like to, kind of throw ideas out there and then get some comments and feedback.
Sure. I think one thing, most of the things that we talk about and most of the things that we tackle and handle are generalizable, but in the case of approval, I think that there are nuances. For instance, if you have a corporate setting, things like promotions or public recognition or raises, any type of bonus scale can actually drive motivation. But also it can create a healthy competition, or in some cases, an unhealthy competition. So I think you need to know the atmosphere and kind of the temperature of your specific work environment, of your specific organization, to make a calculated decision on how much to use extrinsic approval with your employees, and when to find another route. But with a performing artist, extrinsic approval can be a little dangerous. Yes. So you see that nuance where if a person is on a stage as a performing artist, that can pull morale down if they are looking too much for extrinsic approval and not enough from what comes within, the approval that comes within. However, in a corporate structure, extrinsic approval may actually boost morale. So, this is one of the topics that has nuances. And even though the topic of approval is generalizable, I think the strategies used and the tips may be a little different based on what the circumstances are.
I think so as well. And in a corporate structure, we can't really separate it from, to an extent, social conditioning and culture. So, for instance, in society, it often awards people who seek external approval through good grades, for example, for students. In the corporate world or business world, let's say job titles. That might be another boost. Physical appearance too. That can also play into it a bit, whether it's in society or business. Those expectations. For instance, in sports, particularly with younger children, when they started with participation trophies, that's, you can kind of understand the why that underlines it, but at the same time, we have to be careful about messages that are also being sent.
Definitely. Yes, definitely.
In the corporate world, sometimes instead of a raise, for example, or maybe, that corner office with a window idea.
Yes.
Where, someone may be given something that by appearance seems valuable, but it's actually kind of hollow. It's easy to give someone a title, but unless it truly has a meaning behind it, that could be problematic.
Definitely. And, there are and that's exactly why I said the importance of understanding your specific and unique corporate culture, because from corporation to corporation or organization to organization, you're going to have little nuances within that structure. What if you own a corporation full of millennials? What if you own a nonprofit with baby boomers? It just kind of depends. There are so many aspects to which strategies are appropriate, and which strategies can actually be counterproductive. You mentioned children. If you have an organization where you deal with children, you have to be very careful with children, because if you are somewhat awarding the children that may excel in a certain area, what about the children that are working really hard, but just may not be excelling at the same rate? And so do you just leave them with nothing? Well, that hampers their self-esteem. And that also can possibly build in a poor, a poor sense of self-worth, for those children. And that may teach them to disapprove of their own efforts, So all of, that's why this topic it's so nuanced. And I think, a lot of corporations and organizations should bring in professionals that can assess the different human behavioral patterns, like, the difference in children based on their development and where they are, and adults, that's very different. So I think the results can only come out, more positive if they bring in professionals that can make the appropriate assessment for their specific organization.
I think helping them to recognize, well, perhaps starting with an explanation of the two different types, and why they are both important. In other words, we don't want them to say one is better than the other, whereas actually they complement each other. It's when we see what I would call a radical shift, where perhaps it's too far in one direction or too far in the other direction. So I think it's important to recognize where your approval is coming from. And if you value one over the other, or you're more comfortable with one over the other,
Sure.
and then kind of learn to shift if necessary. There's also, well, let's see, if we're looking to try and strengthen intrinsic approval, we might ask ourselves, why is it important to me? What is why is this of value to me? And in order to ascertain that, some of the ways that might be done, and I think we mentioned it in another podcast, is some self-reflection. And whether that, is journaling, if someone likes to write, for example, or if they're not crazy about journaling or writing, if they're more visual, they might be able to maybe draw something. Or because of technology, it could be recording. How we have those little handheld recorders, or our phones for that matter, and be able to maybe dictate, even if it's a couple words, perhaps about how we're feeling, that we can go back and revisit. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it's kind of like an internal check-in. And then if we go back and listen to it or read it again, we can see the changes, perhaps note progress. And we have to be careful how we define progress as well, so we don't fall into that minefield either.
Yes.
We live in color, emotional beings. From moment to moment, it can change.